Aloha, friends. Aloha. We're all getting ourselves organized. And we have friends all over the place getting settled in. We're going to start with devotions, friends, before our program begins. We have a prayer sung from the temple. We'll start from the temple, the friends gathered at the temple, and then we'll offer an opportunity for the friends in American Samoa, and then we will hear from our chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly. And friends, you can see Mr. Dunbar has joined us as well. We'll be starting with two prayers, one from the temple and one from American Samoa. And then we'll turn it over to the chairman to offer some welcoming remarks.
matua lofa ua matau pene iai tamato anga salana sai lima ya e fatau nuina lo matau tau mafa ya matau malolo sima tutuma umai wana ora uafia ela walo faia mafaya mia etonu ya te oe le mama lu sili ia sila mai o tupulanga uma ua poto nei ua e matua lofa ua matope nei ai tamato anga salana sai limai ya e fatau nuina lo matau mapa ya matoma lolo siba tutuma umai wana ora uafia ema wana faia mapaya mia etonu ya te oe ya e patau nuina lo matota mawhaia matoma lolo sima tutuma umai wana ora uafia ena walo faia mawhaia mia
It is a privilege and honor for me, speaking on behalf of the Baha'i community of both Samoas, on behalf of the Councillor and the dear Auxiliary Board members, members of the National Spiritual Assembly, and all the Baha'i communities of Samoa and American Samoa. I would like to welcome this great opportunity. Mr. Dunbar. When we heard of this good news, and then we were thinking to ourselves that this is a golden opportunity for the Baha'is of Samoa to view, to listen, to gather, to get a lot of learning from you, dear Mr. Dunbar. As member of the Universal House of Justice, as well as the International Teaching Center, from all those, we are eagering and coming to our mind that this is the first time ever in Samoa, in the two Samoans, to view and to see your handsome faces, bringing a lot of delight and inspiration to the Baha'i community of two Samoas. We welcome you with our open hands and open heart. Secondly, we would like to welcome all the Samoan Baha'is abroad, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, United States, as well as American Samoa, who have gathered this afternoon to bring delight and more lightening to ourselves while we are on our journey towards the 5-year plan. Mr. Hooper Dunbar, we pray for your life and whatever you are doing throughout the Baha'i world and here in Samoa. We welcome you so much. Once again, welcome amongst the Baha'i community of Samoa and overseas. Thank you.
Thank you, Lemalu. Thank you, friends, for those wonderful prayers and for the wonderful warm welcome from the National Spiritual Assembly Chairman. And it is a true bounty for us all to gather together electronically from across the ocean and welcome our dear brother, Mr. Dunbar, into our homes, into our centers, into the wonderful, beautiful grounds of the House of Worship. And it is a true bounty for us, and we are quite excited and in many ways overwhelmed as well with this wonderful bounty. Friends, just a couple words to introduce our dear brother, Mr. Dunbar, who has longed for many, many years to visit the beautiful Samoan Islands. And we hope and pray that God will give him and give us the great bounty of receiving him in person after this challenge that the world is experiencing. And we invite him wholeheartedly to try to make plans to join us, visit us in Samoa. And we hope that wish will come true. Friends, just a couple kind of introductory remarks, not only about Mr. Dunbar, but about the wonderful efforts that you're all making in your communities, and to place today's conversation with Mr. Dunbar within the larger context of the community building process that you are all engaged in. For the past 25 years, friends, the House of Justice has been guiding and nurturing us, encouraging us, and helping us understand this concept of community building and how we are appreciating more with each passing plan and each passing year what it means to draw people from the wider community closer to Baha'u'llah himself. At the heart of this process is the Word of God and the person of Baha'u'llah. And so whether we are understanding the concept of working within a cluster, within neighborhoods, the concept of the educational process to raise human resources, to be able to serve and to reach the waiting multitudes, whether we understand the concept of the movement of a population that begin with individuals and their friends and their families and ultimately whole neighborhoods into this process. We know, friends, that, that teaching is at the heart of this endeavor. Sharing the message of Baha'u'llah, connecting hearts with the person of Baha'u'llah and his revelation, and our role and responsibility to nurture that process. And in that process, we ourselves draw closer to Baha'u'llah. We ourselves draw on the confirmations that are promised to us as we step into this field of teaching and service. And so, friends, as we welcome Mr. Dunbar, we can also appreciate that this man has led this life of teaching and service. This man who came to know of the faith as a young teenager, really, in his late teens in Los Angeles. He was a budding actor in Hollywood, and he found himself in a home, as often as many of us do, talking among friends about Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith. And he was so attracted to this message that I remember him once telling the youth in the Holy Land about a dream he used to have when he became a Baha'i, in the early days and weeks of him embracing this new message. He used to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. in the morning from this dream. And he dreamt that he was at a fountain of light. And every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, he would wake up in this dream. And he was filled with joy and wonderment. But then, after a few weeks, this dream stopped. And he was telling us that he was having a conversation with his spiritual mother, who used to run this fireside that attracted him to the faith. And he was sharing with her that this wonderful dream he used to have, and what a wonderful way to wake up every morning. And then it stopped. And he was wondering what happened. And this woman said, when did it stop? And he said, last week or something like this. And she said, oh, I should put you back on my prayer list. I was praying for you every morning at 5 o'clock to make you firm, to strengthen you, to set your feet firm. And I thought that you were okay. So I took you off my prayer list and I started to pray for other people. And he said, no, put me back on the prayer list. And it was a reminder to him so early of the power of prayer and this spiritual, mystical, mysterious revelation that we are all part of. He soon found himself so enamored with this new revelation and the call to service and teaching that he himself arose, left his budding career that had great promise, and arose to go pioneering to Central America and found himself in a place in Nicaragua called the Mosquito Coast. And in Samoa, we are very familiar with the mosquitoes, right, friends? And that's why we have the mosquito dance, right? So he went to a place called the Mosquito Coast. So when he comes to Samoa, maybe we'll teach him the mosquito dance. And friends, one thing that stood out as when he was telling us about his early pioneering efforts, he said that he was so blessed, he felt so blessed to be in Los Angeles, a place that welcomed so many of the hands of the cause. And he used to go to the Baha'i Center in Los Angeles and see the hands of the cause. Rarely would he get to talk to any of them because there were so many Baha'is. And he would sit in the back of the room, and he felt so blessed to at least be in their presence and to hear from them. And he thought, now that I've gone pioneering to this very remote region, at least I feel blessed that I had a couple years in Los Angeles where I met the hands of the cause. And to his great surprise, what happened? Hand of the cause after hand of the cause began to visit him. This singular pioneer in Nicaragua, the hands of the cause began to visit him, stay with him in his home, teach with him, and he began to accompany them on their travels. And he could not imagine how blessed he became that Baha'u'llah allowed him to draw so close to this institution of the hands of the cause. And this institution further reinforced his desire to teach and to serve. Friends, it's a very long story, but just to know that he was eventually appointed to the first International Teaching Center, which brought together 3 souls together with the hands of the cause to form the first International Teaching Center. And Hooper Dunbar was among 3 of these souls who joined the hands of the cause. He served on the International Teaching Center till 1988, where he was elected to the Universal House of Justice, and he served this supreme body, this last refuge of a tottering civilization, for 2 decades, for 20 years, until his retirement. His desire not only to teach and to serve was then further reinforced by this great love he had for diving into the ocean of Baha'u'llah's revelation. And he began to study and to share and accompany others in the process of studying the revelation of Baha'u'llah. And so the theme of today's talk by our dear brother, Mr. Dunbar, the greatness of Baha'u'llah and his revelation, is well timed and well themed because of where we find ourselves in the 5-year plan. The friends throughout Samoa, the friends at the temple, have just concluded a 2-day reflection gathering, preparing themselves for the second last cycle of this 5-year plan. And so this talk will not only inspire us, but will help us place what we are doing, friends, in terms of our community building efforts in their proper perspective, in terms of understanding Baha'u'llah's revelation, how Baha'u'llah influences our lives and those that we are joining hands with, and how transformative that process can be for us, our families, and our communities. So friends, we're with a very big talofa. We welcome Mr. Dunbar into our community. After his talk, dear Bob Ale, who, as you all know now, has just been appointed as the newest and youngest member of the Continental Board of Counselors for Australasia, will facilitate the question and answer after Mr. Dunbar's talk. So dear brother, Mr. Dunbar, welcome.
So happy, friends, to be with you. I mean, the occasion that I have a chance to see you all is thrilling and wonderful, but far transcending our encounter with each other is the fact that you're all united through this bounty of Baha'u'llah. I think one of the great rewards of the pandemic has been Zoom, and the fact that the friends see each other from all over, and a very historic moment that American Samoa, American Samoa, and the friends living abroad in so many places are able to see each other, and I'm able to see you. And that is a wonderful and exciting moment, a new breakthrough, so to speak. And I hope that this, as Kirk has pointed out, will enthuse you all to talk about this occasion and share with other friends the wonder of it. Our hearts reach out to each other at times like this. The world is in many places are suffering terrific restrictions. We've been confined here in California for a long time now in our houses, and yet I've been meeting friends in Europe and around the United States and in the northern Pacific areas, and now today together with you. It's a great innovation, I think, what's happening to us. I want to greet all of you, the Baha'i believers that are online, and also friends of the Baha'is who may be with each other and sharing this occasion. So it's a wonderful thing. And the occasion to talk about the greatness of the message of the revelation of Baha'u'llah is beyond anyone really to do it justice. It's such a mighty theme. Fortunately, we have the words of the central figures about this occasion. We are so fortunate that we've been born within this Baha'i era, the era of the dispensations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And Shoghi Effendi has clearly pointed out to us something that not the early Baha'is and friends were not fully aware of, and that is that we have had twin manifestations. Because the earlier Baha'is, when hearing about the work of the Bab as a herald of Baha'u'llah, conceived that he was like John the Baptist, which is correct, but far transcends that prophetic role, having been assigned the title from Baha'u'llah of monarch of the messengers of God, the king of God's messengers and prophets. We can only imagine what that might mean in the world to come. And then he says these twin manifestations, the miracle of the Bab in the Bab's dispensation is not that he's the herald of Baha'u'llah, but that he is an independent manifestation of the light of God. And that this light he diffused through his dispensation, and then we're told from both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, his connection with Baha'u'llah continues after. So we have what Shoghi Effendi calls the twin manifestations. This is extraordinary. The light of both the Bab and Baha'u'llah, as affirmed by Abdu'l-Baha in his Will and Testament, shine down upon the guardian in his time and continue after that, and then in the case of the Universal House of Justice, continue to protect and inspire the institution of the Universal House of Justice. And they continue to shower their light and divine confirmations universally on all those who embrace the message, and beyond those that are being prepared in different ways. Unfortunately, some of it through suffering, softening the hearts of people, making them aware of the need to live in fellowship and love and brotherhood with all the other creatures on this earth. Know ye not, says Baha'u'llah, why we've created you all from the same dust? That no one should exalt himself above anybody else. And this humility in our relationships with each other, which we have to preserve and work to maintain in the faith, is a result of the greatness of this divine presence of the Spirit of these two manifestations of God shining into our inner beings, bestowing on us their precious gifts, the verses of their revelations. These are like seeds which they've cast into our inner beings. Then they remind us, Shoghi Effendi reminds us, that the soil has to be prepared so that those seeds will become plants and grow and produce the beautiful bounties and gifts which he's promised are in the soul through this bestowal of the manifestations. But we have to prepare the soil, we have to cleanse our hearts, we have to turn the mirror of our inner beings towards these manifestations. And all of that is a challenge. And why is it a challenge? Baha'u'llah tells us very directly it's a challenge because in this world we have been connected with an animal body, with a physical, material human body, and that has its own restrictions. And it's only through the revelation of Baha'u'llah that we're able to transcend those limitations. So one of the limitations, he says, is that we love ourselves. We think of ourselves as more important than anything else. Well, That's fairly natural since we're living in this body and dealing with everybody else. But we have to learn to sacrifice and transcend our selfishness. Then he said the other thing that distracts us, and distracts us in the sense that it attracts us, it magnetizes us away from how we should be and how we should be living, are the passions of our animal flesh. Everybody knows they're there. If you pay too much attention to them, they grow in power. So you have to discipline. We all have to discipline ourselves in that regard, and count on his bounties and his blessings, and he gives us prayers so that we might protect ourselves from the evils of self and passion. And what better place to say those prayers than in the blessed houses of worship, of which you have a very special one, connected with the dear hand of the cause, Ugo Giaccheri. What a hero he was. When he was mentioned at the table in the Pilgrim House when Florence Mayberry was with the Guardian in 1957, he said that Ugo Giaccheri is 1,000 men. That's a Persian saying. If somebody's very terrific and powerful, they say that. And then he said, and he's almost a saint, he said, because he was still alive. Blessed, that dear, blessed soul. And very blessed is Samoa through his having arisen and originally carried the faith there to the Malietoa. So it is one wonderful history that you have there. I was very close to Dr. Giaccheri. He wasn't very close to me, but I was very close to him. Friends, how can we ever appreciate having been born at the time we've been born? What did we do to deserve this? Nothing that we can discover. It's a complete bounty of his. There's no way to thank God or thank Baha'u'llah for the favor of having been born in this time that we're in now. It's quite another age, another universe that we've suddenly been born into. If we think how much the world has changed since 1844, extraordinary. Extraordinary. For 2,000 years before that, it took the same amount of time to go from Jerusalem to Rome or to Paris at the beginning of that period as it did at the end, because you went by horseback or donkey or sailing ship. And suddenly we're vaulted into a new stage where not only do we go faster on the ground, but we have become airborne. Abdu'l-Baha, speaking of the greatness of this time and of this age and of the bounties that God is showering upon us, wrote in a tablet when he was in New York to a woman that had written him, and extolled, he said, the extraordinary developments of science that are pouring into the world. Now, you know, you've perhaps seen in the writings where it says that the sciences and the wonders of this time are communicated into the souls of receptive souls through those detached believers, those friends who've gone to the next world, cleansed of this world, and become the instruments, the leaven, to leaven arts and sciences to all the rest of us. And what a job they're doing, and how those 20,000 martyrs of the heroic age, of the earliest stage of this new day, how their blood is provided for something very special. Shoghi Effendi used to talk about the cause. The revelations are like a seed which God has planted in the soil of the earth. And then those seeds were watered with the blood of 20,000 martyrs. And that gave rise to a young tree. And that tree has been growing and putting out its branches, its twigs, its branches, its leaves. And he said, when that tree gives forth blossoms, the fragrant blossoms, he said, that will be the stage of the world order of Baha'u'llah. But then the tree grows and develops even more and finally gives a fruit. And that fruit, he said, is the divine civilization that we're striving to lay the foundation for in the world through the various plans that we're carrying out under the House of Justice. So, do you see how from the revealing of the verses of God by the manifestations, attraction of those holy souls that became the martyrs at the beginning, the growth of the administrative order, which is this young tree, and when that tree reaches a stage of blossoming and flowering, that becomes the world order of Baha'u'llah, different in character, but the administrative order is the embryo of this world order that's coming later on. And then finally it reaches its consummation through the fruition of the tree, this tree of divine revelation, with the birth of a world civilization, the first one on this planet that we have any record of. Again, in a tablet, Abdu'l-Baha says that if we prostrated ourselves 1,000 times a day in thanksgiving to Baha'u'llah for having brought us into being at this time, it would be inadequate. Would that we had 10,000 lives, Abdu'l-Baha says, that we could sacrifice for the Blessed Beauty and what he suffered. And friends, we need to review and read the various written documents that we have that recount the lives of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the Dawnbreakers, and the other histories of Baha'u'llah, and God Passes By, particularly important. These books are so important. If you find them difficult to read them in groups and keep a dictionary and consult with each other about the meanings that they have. They will bring great joy to your hearts and vision that will awaken. And also that, the reading of those things, the disciplining ourselves to try to emulate and follow those examples of the Dawnbreakers will help for these seeds that are in our souls that the manifestations have cast there through their bounties to grow and flourish. And then we'll have special fruits and lovely gifts to share with others. I wanted to read a quotation from Abdu'l-Baha. He says, "Centuries, nay ages must pass away, ere the day star of truth," the manifestation, "shineth again in its midsummer splendor, or appeareth once more in the radiance of its vernal glory. How thankful must we be for having been made in this day the recipients of so overwhelming a favor. Would that we had 10,000 lives, that we might lay them down in thanksgiving for so rare a privilege, so high an attainment, so priceless a bounty." Further, he says, "The holy ones of past ages and centuries have, each and all, yearned with tearful eyes to live, though for one moment, in the day of God. Their longings unsatisfied, they repaired to the great beyond. How great, therefore, is the bounty of the Abha Beauty, who, notwithstanding our utter unworthiness, hath, through his grace and mercy, breathed into us in this divinely illumined century the spirit of life, and has gathered us beneath the standard of the beloved of the world, and chosen to confer upon us a bounty for which the mighty ones of bygone ages had craved in vain. They were longing to attain to this. The souls, he says, of the well-favored among the concourse on high, the sacred dwellers of the most exalted paradise, are in this day filled with burning desire to return unto this world, that they may render such service as lieth in their power to the threshold of the Abha beauty. We, friends, are here. We have this opportunity. How can we not engage our lives and our energies in longing to which these great saints and holy beings of the past want to come back to the world, to participate, though it be for a moment? And we still have perhaps decades to go. It's such a favor, it's such a undeserved favor. You could busy scratch your head and say, why was I chosen? Why was I allowed? Why was I able to recognize? And the people next to me here haven't seen the light yet. And how through our kindness and our love and our transformed character, we can perhaps stimulate them to the point where they catch fire too. Abdu'l-Baha once was talking about the souls are in different conditions. There's some souls, and I think these are these waiting souls that Shoghi Effendi talked about, that we should pray to Baha'u'llah to find. Amongst all the souls around us, there are souls that have been prepared by God and are waiting for the revelation, waiting to hear about it. He said they're like oil. When you touch the light of the fire of the faith to them, they immediately ignite and burn bright. Then he said there's another class of souls which are a bit like green branches. They're not, the wood is not ready to burn, and you have to hold the fire near them a long time, under them, and gradually, after much sputtering and crackling, they catch fire. He said there's some other souls that are like rocks. You have to have them near you, you heat them all the time. They take from your heat and they stay warm as long as you're around. But if you're away from them, they cool off again. We see different people in our lives, how they match these different types. We have this greatest gift of teaching that Abdu'l-Baha talks about in his Will and Testament. He said the greatest gift of God is teaching. This is the greatest gift of God to us, because by teaching the cause of God, by proclaiming the revelation and verses of our Maker, we are participating in the actions of the manifestations of God. And miraculously, Abdu'l-Baha says that the true believers that are teaching the cause in this day have stations similar to the lesser prophets of the house of Israel, prophets of God, similar to that, because the Baha'is, many of the early Baha'is arose and went to different countries where no Baha'i had ever been. They became the mouthpiece of the manifestation to the people in that place. They became a fountain of prayer, praying for their spiritual awakening when they went to these places. And you've done that in different villages around the islands where you are, and attracted people to the cause. The greatest gift of God is teaching. Then Shoghi Effendi tells us that if the friends are not teaching the faith, they do not attract divine confirmations. As I understand, divine confirmations, the special blessings of God, are given and channeled through those people who are speaking about the faith, who are loving the faith, who are serving the faith. If we're not engaged in the teaching of the faith, he said that the Master himself says those divine confirmations will be cut off. The soul will not have access to those divine confirmations unless they're teaching. This is why it's the greatest gift of God. You need divine confirmations for your spiritual unfoldment and growth. So engaging in service is really a blessing to us rather than something that to the other people. And we beg God that we might be able to communicate something of the deep feelings that we have for the faith to others. And if we're sincere in our efforts, if we use the prayers of the divine plan and of the teaching prayers, and if we ask Baha'u'llah to help us find waiting souls to teach, I think it's certain that we will attract those bounties and find such souls. And then the growth of the cause will continue to go forward. In the same tablet where Abdu'l-Baha was talking about how great this day is, and that because of these bounties of Baha'u'llah, new arts and sciences will pour into the world. He says in that tablet that to the degree possible for this limited material world, the activities of the other world will be attracted here. They will be reflected here. That world, it seems to us, is a world of flight, where you move very quickly to be with whichever loved ones you want to be with in your activities and so on when you're in that other world. And now, after centuries that people have dreamt of how to fly, and Leonardo da Vinci and many other scientists have tried to figure out how can we fly, suddenly the knowledge of how to fly has been given to mankind, and we're in the air. And Mr. Olinga told me, he said that when he was with Shoghi Effendi, he said that all travel will go aerial in the future. And he said they'll tear up these ugly highways and asphalted roads and make gardens, beautiful gardens. And he said even individuals will fly by themselves where they need to go. It's just, what a different kind of a world we're living in. Then he gave another example, and this is now in 1912, friends. He said that before long, ere long, you will see how anyone, any soul anywhere on the face of the earth will be able to speak to any other soul anywhere on the face of the earth at any time that they wish. The lady showed this tablet to some of the other friends. The friend said, "Don't show that to people. That's impossible to understand. Nobody can understand that. What's that mean? What is the Master saying? How can everybody be everywhere all at the same time?" Now, friends, you see you have your phones there too. Now, this is just the beginning. It's getting better and better from that point of view. We can be in touch with each other. We are one human race. And when we solve the problem of multiple languages, get auxiliary languages so that we can all converse together and read each other's ideas, about each other's ideas and lives, that'll be a great bonding that will take place. The revelation itself, Shoghi Effendi likens to a force. He said, this force, which has come with the twin revelations of the Baba and Baha'u'llah, has infused the world. All the atoms of the world, all the molecules of existence of this, we're talking about our planet, which is pretty much our universe for the moment. They've been filled with a dynamic And that force acts on society and acts on us as individuals, continues to act. It's an undying force. And like the rising of the sun, it doesn't release all the energy of the sun. The sun's always the same, but it depends on what time of day it is, how much the influence reaches us. Now we're in the early stages of the growth of the cause and the revelation, the forces of the revelation. Baha'u'llah tells us have gone out and are acting on society and will continue to act through the centuries to come. And Baha'u'llah himself will marshal those forces who arise to channel the power that God has released through the revelation. And he said it acts as a two-edged sword, these forces of the revelation. On the one hand, it severs and sunders, splits the relationship that old institutions had with each other. This is the process of disintegration of the old world order that we live in. And so the connections that government and religion and so many other things had with each other and with the people have all been put in jeopardy. They're suffering from that. And then the same forces reinforce your actions, my actions as Baha'is, to carry out the integration, the connecting together that is the fruit of this revelation. The force of the revelation divides the people from their old connections, and now in this new stage is uniting them in a new concept, a new vision. The world's equilibrium, Baha'u'llah says in the Aqdas, has been altered, it's been changed. He says the old world order, we will roll up the old world order and we will roll out a new one in its stead. Well, we're in the rolling process, so to speak. It's rolling right over our heads, much of it. And there's no way for the Baha'is to escape the suffering of all the rest of the people. But we have the inner protection of Baha'u'llah, and we have the knowledge of why mankind is suffering these difficulties. Some of the Baha'i friends, if they have not studied the cause and deepened themselves, think that we need to create new politics, and that through politics we can change the world. But this is outside of what Baha'u'llah has called us to. He said we must transcend national politics, and the politics of the world are mostly national. What we know, we have supranational policies, teachings in the faith about how we need to be united at the international level, transcending nationalism, transcending communism, socialism, all those things. Baha'u'llah, in his writings, is quite clear about this, and Shoghi Effendi repeats it in one of his letters called Promise Day Has Come. He talks about 3 false gods that the people are worshiping instead of God. They've drifted away from God. The force of religion in human lives is dimming, and that, of course, gives rise to extra license, liberty on our part. We do whatever we want to do because we're not worried about God punishing us or recognizing that we are creatures of God, and really all of our body, all of our capacities are a gift from Him. And He defines in Revelation how we should use this gift. But we breeze off and have our vacation and want to do everything we want to do. God help us to see beyond that and center our energies in the propagation of the faith of God. That's what we've really been called to. Well, I don't want to exhaust everybody out there, but these few comments have come to my mind while I'm sitting here with you. I had in mind to say some other things. They've gone away and been replaced by what I hope is inspiration from spiritual inspiration, which coincides with the needs of the people that are listening. Always the speaker wants to see what the need of our listener is and address that. And I hope that some of these comments may have enlightened you or lifted your hearts or made you rejoice, made you reaffirm once again what a blessing it is that we've been brought into being at this time and without any knowledge of why really we have been born now and not 200 years past, when we wouldn't have known anything about the Baba and Baha'u'llah. So I think you have more parts to your program. I'll pass this back.
Thank you. That was so wonderful, so inspiring, and really so much to help us think about, especially at this time, like you said, and what we're called on as Baha'is to do and to contribute. In a recent message a few years ago, the House of Justice wrote to the Baha'is of Samoa, and they referenced Baha'u'llah's four valleys, and they called on the Baha'is to follow the way of the mystic knower and to wholeheartedly fling ourselves into that sea of grandeur. And the Baha'is really took that to heart and really focused on not only what that story meant, but also on that concept of wholehearted, following wholeheartedly, not half-heartedly, but wholeheartedly. And it was wonderful how meaningful these messages from the House of Justice have been for the Friends. Friends, it's also wonderful. I just want to hand it over to dear Bob now, but I'm also, maybe I'll step in line and take the first question, actually. It's wonderful that we're reminded that Mr. Dunbar had a close relationship with Hand of the Cause Giacari. And this is another very good reason, if he didn't have enough already, to visit Samoa and to visit the gravesite on temple grounds of Mr. Giacari. So maybe one story about Mr. Giacari because the Samoan Baha'i community are the caretakers of this sacred ground of his resting place. And one of the interesting things about the Hands of the Cause, friends, is that they scattered throughout the world. And they passed away in some of the most remote places, from Ecuador to Hawaii to Samoa. And it's so wonderful that the Samoan Baha'is have been given this honor of being caretakers and custodians of his gravesite. And maybe Mr. Dunbar could share one story with us about this Hand of the Cause, and then turn it over to dear Bob.
He was very interesting man. He was actually a count from Sicily. I mean, he was of the upper classes of Europe, recognized. And he married, his wife was from the royal household of Sweden. And she became a very close companion of his. And he had always wanted to be buried next to her. It didn't work out that way. But no doubt they are united in spiritual bonds now in the world to come. It's a bit of a personal story, but I was elected to the House of Justice, and I was standing on the stage there. Adib, Tarzada, and myself were the 8th and 9th of the members of the House, new members. 2 had resigned, so the delegates had elected replacements. And I felt very nervous, like, what am I doing here? And my knees were shaking inside my pants. And I came off the platform, and the friends, so many came up and offered hugs and inappropriate congratulations, because it's such a it's a blessing but a burden. You want to pray. House of Justice doesn't need our prayers, but the members of the House of Justice, friends, support them with your prayers and supplications. And later, a couple of months after the convention, I went to visit Dr. Jukari. He was in Monaco at that time. And he saw me and he wasn't very pleased. And he said, I heard you were crying on the platform. I said, no, I wasn't crying on the platform. I was nervous. I was crying after I got to the audience and they all started hugging me. That made me cry. So he was a little forgiving about that. He had a high standard that he wanted everyone to keep to. And I'm sure that he's looking over all of you and prays for your well-being and prays for your birth in this mystic knowledge that Kirk has mentioned that the House of Justice commended to you. We have this vision in the book of the Certitude, in the Kitab-i-Gan, that about the true seeker, what the qualities of the true seeker are, and then what the outcome, if we make those efforts to live according to that, there's this glorious promise that we'll be transformed and we'll see with new eyes and hear with the new ears and be given a new mind, and we'll be able to perceive truth at 1,000 meters, and is extraordinary promises. But I think it's easy for us as human beings to lose sight of that and think, oh, that was for those special people in Baha'u'llah's time. I can't do that, and I can't do that. We should perhaps revisit the question and ask Baha'u'llah ourselves in our hearts, how much does he want from us? He's already told us he wants everything.
We're going to ask Bob to take himself off mute. Bob is at the temple with the friends gathered at the temple. And if Bob could also share a few words and then maybe facilitate a discussion. Friends, feel free to ask questions and offer your thoughts and comments. Maybe Mr. Dunbar, how much time do we have? Maybe we ask that first, because the Samoans can keep you for about 3-4 hours. So we just want to make sure.
Well, let's go on now. If I eventually pass out, then you'll see that I'm happy to keep going.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar, for those very inspiring and wonderful comments and reflections. And as Kirk mentioned, it really coincides with our launching of the 19th cycle, and we're all excited with to take forward what we have been reflecting on in the last couple of days, and really strive to the best of our abilities to win the goals of this 5-year plan. Thank you very much. I think we can all agree in this room that you've given us so much inspiration, but also a deep and profound realization of the opportunity we've been given. And it's such a privilege to live in this age. And I remember when I first was called to serve as an assistant to an auxiliary board member, and we were handed a picture of the beloved master. And behind the picture, there was a quote from Abdu'l-Baha that we must really strive to take advantage of the time that we have. I'm terribly paraphrasing, but because we might lose it or others will take it from us. But thank you again. I might hand it over to the, maybe some housekeeping. We can sort of go around. Maybe I'll ask the friends first here in the temple grounds and see if anyone wants to ask questions or share any stories or reflections, and then we'll kind of go around the planet. Maybe if I could ask a question, and it's something we've been sharing a lot about in our reflection gatherings, in our Kasta agency meetings, and you've spoken about the bounty and the gift of teaching. And I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of persecution in Samoa, but also there's a lot of courage amongst our friends. But one question that comes to mind is around our capacity to teach. How can we diffuse the divine teachings in a way that does not come across as patronizing to the listener or being triumphalist, but also is not undermining the greatness of the course? If you could share any insights or experiences.
Yes, okay. He says that we should never esteem ourselves as knowing more than others, and we should offer the knowledge of the faith, proclaim the existence of the faith in a humble manner, of sharing with others. In one place he says, as if you were offering a jewel to a king. This is useful to remember. I see that I saw in the tablets of Baha'u'llah, he talks about the importance of proclaiming the cause of God. He says everyone is called upon to proclaim the cause, no matter how humble, whatever your circumstance in life. Everyone is responsible for God, for proclaiming his faith. Now, proclaiming his faith, he said that Shoghi Effendi actually clarifies that, because he says we need to tell people that there is such a thing as the Baha'i faith, that its founder is one of these, we believe, is one of these great divine teachers that God has sent us from age to age, and that he brings the solutions to these problems we're all suffering from, that he brings a plan how to change the planet into a garden of peace and well-being. People need to hear that much. Shoghi Effendi says the name Baha'i and Baha'u'llah have places in the soul. When they hear it, it locks in, it can't go. It doesn't come out again. And he said it matures, it's fed by other information that comes along. So proclaiming the name of Baha'u'llah and Baha'i is very important, especially if we're seeing the person maybe only once. We don't know how long, how many times, how long we'll have. We need to share. If we feel moved and they seem receptive enough to listen, we share it with them. We are not responsible for their response. They may respond, oh, that's so interesting, I'd like to hear more about that. In which case, if they show interest, then Baha'u'llah says, teach them. Look what he's saying. He's saying the proclamation is just telling that such a thing exists. Teaching is sharing the teachings, the principles, the whole plan of the faith. But we don't give that all at once. We let people know that such a thing exists. Now, there's a confusion that people say that's proselytizing. It would hardly be proselytizing. Proselytizing is to push Christianity down the throat of someone who's already Christian, to join this church or that church, and you'll get this advantage. We'll give you a prize. We'll give you some money. We'll send your children to college. You can come to the hospital free, whatever that is. That's proselytizing. But informing people, as Baha'u'llah is commanding us, proclaim the cause of God, the existence of the cause. People have to hear about it. Then, if it's done in a delicate way, they may ask you for more information. The time we live is very fortunate because we can say to them, I think you would do well if you informed yourself on the internet at Baha'i.org or wherever the address of the Baha'is are in your area. People can get online and read in their own language and hear about the teachings without being embarrassed by having to ask questions about it if they're shy or not sure themselves or nervous that they're a Christian and they'll be betraying their Lord or something. We have such marvelous teachings about the unity of God, the unity of the manifestations of God, all these religions being an eternal faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. Terrific. Yes, sir. Bob, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar.
See, if the other friends have something to say or they want to ask something.
Yeah. We have a question from Sally. If you could come closer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dunbar, for the opportunity and words full of inspiration. I have a question. Baha'u'llah's dispensation will last 500,000 years. How does this influence future messengers of God who will come after 1,000 years?
Well, you're a very forward thinker. You're moving very, very swiftly ahead. We're trying to solve the problem of a few believers, new believers, before the end of this plan. But these things have been left in our teachings, and Shoghi Effendi said the Baha'is that study the writings know the answers to them. First, you're saying the dispensation, 500,000 years, that needs to be altered in accordance with the writings where it says the Baha'i cycle will last 500,000 years. The cycle is different from dispensations. And the era, Baha'i era in the Baha'i writings, means the dispensation of the Bab plus the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And the dispensation of the Bab, oddly enough, has been defined in different ways. One time it's defined as the year 9, when Baha'u'llah's revelation comes to him, the dispensation of the Bab is over. Another, the laws of the Bayan are applied to a limited degree until Baha'u'llah makes his declaration at the Garden of Rizwan. So that's 20 years, 20 years of the dispensation of the Bab. In another letter, the Guardian says, because of the connection between Baha'u'llah, the mystic identity of the one with the other, Baha'u'llah says, as I said in my own previous revelation about the revelation of the Bab, as if he were one soul with the Bab. He said that because Baha'u'llah has been joined with Baha'u'llah, but the Bab with Baha'u'llah, he speaks about him. Let me read you the exact words, we don't get lost here. Very important. Relationship of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Allied. The Bab is allied, though subordinate in rank, with Baha'u'llah, and invested with the authority of presiding with him over the destinies of this supreme dispensation. So the Bab and Baha'u'llah together formed the Baha'i Era. And the Baha'i Era is literally the 1,000 years, no less than 1,000 years until another manifestation might appear, is mentioned in the as the the 1,000-year period. Then beyond that, he said there'll be a series of dispensations of different manifestations of God reaching into the countless centuries of the future, 500 centuries to come. He explains that the wonder of Baha'u'llah is that he will overshadow spiritually all of those manifestations. They will derive their spiritual authority from him, but with regard to their relationship to the day in which they appear, they will have the power of revelation, and they can alter the laws of the Kitabi Akdas. So now, how soon will that happen? I think, we're just waiting for 1,000 years, but it has just been said no less than 1,000 years. So what do we have, 850 more or something like that before we're going to have any possibility of? And that is a terrific relief, so that we're not running around looking for another manifestation of God in the meanwhile. We have a lot of other things to do to unite mankind, to create one world civilization. All of that's ahead of us. But Abdu'l-Baha, in his writing, in tablets, has said that it may not be 1,000 years. It may be 5,000 years. It may not be 5,000 years. It may be 10,000 years. This is the most great dispensation of a whole 500,000 year period. So it's going to have to bear fruit. It's going to have to come to leave it a trace. Of course, it's already left that trace because of the ministries of the Bab and Baha'u'llah at the beginning, which have made it the greatest dispensation, but also the fruition of something that happens. Now, when Abdu'l-Baha was in Egypt, the friends have written down his talks, he says 15,000 years. I think he's hinting to us that don't stay up late on the first night after 1,000 years, because it's probably not going to happen. Anyway, we don't have to solve that question tonight, because we've got other things to worry about. But distinguish between dispensation, era, and cycle. Dispensation of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, their own particular times of their ministries, and then the era, which is the combination of the dispensations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and then the cycle, which is extending through numerous manifestations who derive their spiritual authority from Baha'u'llah. And Shoghi Effendi says, we're left thunderstruck, contemplating the influence that Baha'u'llah will continue to have for 500,000 years. That alone suggests the magnitude of the revelation that he's brought. And yet at the same time, he very definitely says, at the level of our inner being, all the manifestations are one voice. But the message that they voice, the message that God gives them, corresponds to the needs of the day in which they appear. Now, this time that we live in needs a big push. It's one of the most serious periods in history where so many people have lost faith or doubt God or have adopted science as God. Is worth thinking about. You're quite well protected, I think, out there in the middle of the Pacific, but now Zoom is going to reach you from all sides, so be careful. Bob, I'm hogging all the time here. What's going on?
Oh, we've just lost the connection from the friends at the temple. So let me take over for Bob and put it out there. Who would like to ask a question? Maybe we put it to American Samoa. Maybe there are several friends in different places in American Samoa that have joined the Zoom. Are any of the friends interested in asking a question or sharing a thought? I see Gila and Fafatai, and I see Patricia, Lao.
Allow Packet.
Lao. Go ahead, Lao.
Yes, allow Pa, Mr. Hooper. Aloha pa to everyone, to all the friends. Can you hold the noise, please? No, we're just happy to show you, it's been it's a privilege listening to the talk today. And as our dear brother was speaking about teaching and doing service, you might like to see how we are working on our service now. It's the Baha'i friends, and we have some of the workers from the Paradise Restaurant over here, and the Rizwan team. So we are here in one of the friends at our neighborhood. We are, helping, improving the home. Painting the house, and doing all that. If you may see, the surrounding is quite heartbreaking to see all this. In this home, one elderly grandma lives in this house over here, if you may see it. And then we have seven kids. And it was just Monday night, there was a Medicaid flight to Hawaii that took the mother and of the kids over here, that took the mother and the elder son to the, he had a broken, broken hip. So they took him to Hawaii on Monday. So now it gives us the opportunity to help cleaning the house.
Nice.
Yeah, it's all the kids, and we have so
Nice service.
Yes.
Nice service.
Yes. So
We just put in brand new doors.
and if you may see, we have the doors here that were on the house. Now we replace the doors and all that. So so we just wanted to share with you, the service Malay Imi and the community of Noli is now doing, in American Samoa here.
Part of building
Yeah.
community.
It's part of our building community.
Hi there. How are
Community
you?
building.
I use this center to control the classes.
Yes.
Thank you, Lao. Thank you for sharing. And also, it's so nice to be able to see, not just hear, but to see a lot of pictures, to see all the friends. One of the impacts of the revelation of Baha'u'llah that we know so well in Samoa is how inspired it makes the friends to reach out and help each other in their communities. Of course, this is one of the cultural principles of the Pacific. There's such a deep sense of togetherness, a deep understanding of helping and caring for each other throughout the Pacific Islands. And the revelation of Baha'u'llah has reinforced that and inspired us to greater feats of service and unity building, caring for each other. Friends, when the golden rule that we all know so well, from whatever background, religious background one is from, but Baha'u'llah then takes it a step further. I remember as a youth, Hooper Dunbar was reinforcing this for us, not only to care for others like you would want to be cared for yourself, love others like you would want to be loved yourself, but Baha'u'llah says, prefer your brother. So he's taking it a step higher. Prefer your brother before yourself. Not the same, but a higher level. And so as Baha'is in our communities, we're striving to understand what that means and what that looks like. And so Lao, thank you so much. I remember, friends, the first time I met Lao was on the tarmac, getting onto the plane in American Samoa, flying back to Upolu. And he came up to me and I didn't know who he was and he knew who I was and he gave me a hug and he said, "Aloha pa." He didn't have shoes on. And I was like, "Where are your shoes?" And he started to quote the Bab about how you're supposed to just leave everything behind when you leave a place. And I was just so touched and so inspired.
Hmm.
Friends, do we have anyone else from American Samoa or elsewhere? I was just informed that the electricity in the temple up in Tiapapata has been cut off. So that's where we lost the friends up at the temple. Fafatai, please.
Thank you, Kurt. No, just about teaching, still referring on teaching, and I know we have been learning about the guidelines that guide the friends for teaching, and also we have a lot of other tools that's been given us as gift from Baha'u'llah, and not only through every writing that we have guided us. But then there's one special tools that we are learning about how to ask for assistance, like it's being relayed on a recent message of the Universal House of Justice about the concourse on high, like how are we like how are we able to get to use in asking not only prayers like for teaching, and also ask assistance from our concourse on high, which always the House of Justice loudly reminded us every message that they have relayed to the Baha'i world of friends. So can you please share like how, in what experience, in what ways, like how are we able to learn, to able to not only using the kindness that has been laid out, and also by using this special tool that has been there with us since the beginning of this mission. Thank you.
Friends, I wanted to mention this morning I was speaking with one of the counselors in Europe, and he was in touch and about to have dinner with a counselor from Yemen who's been in prison for several years now, and he had been speaking with him earlier, and he said that he wished he could go back to prison. He just recently has gotten out. He wants to go back to prison. He said it's such a special place to teach. He said 300 of the most important people in the country that have been arrested and detained. And he said, you're there, you can teach them all. He said, but we didn't have, much means. And he said the ISIS people and the bin Laden people would beat me up from time to time. But that arose sympathy in other people. And he said because he's memorized the Kitab Aqdas, he could recite the verses. And he said the people he was teaching, they didn't have anything to write on except cigarette paper. And they would trace the verses of the Kitab Aqdas on cigarette papers and keep it precious remembrance. What extraordinary. Pray for the Baha'is in Yemen. Many challenges, but they also have embraced the cause with a great power. You probably heard the story where they came from all over the country and they made a circle around the police station and they chanted remover of difficulties over and over and over. And it produced an effect that they got the prisoners out of the prison. Friends. Did you want to ask something, dear friends, the last gentleman that was speaking? Or
Mr. Dunbar, Fafatai was talking about the concept of divine confirmations and its kind of role and presence in our life, and how often the House of Justice reminds us in their messages about this spiritual enterprise that we are part of. Just to add to this question and your sharing about the Baha'is in Yemen, just I think most of the friends, if not all the friends on the conversation this morning know this, but the National Assembly this year of Samoa has taken this very important decision and has rallied the Friends for the translation of both the Akdas and the Igan into Samoan. And this is a huge, huge endeavor, and so many Friends are involved, directly or indirectly. And it is really inspired such a spirit because the Friends are delving so deeply into these texts, into these words of Baha'u'llah, trying to understand their meanings. To be able to translate something, one has to understand it in so many, I mean, it was just, sometimes I get a question from one of the Friends in the translation team, and I have to go back and read, this part of the Agdas that Tofa wrote to me recently, and it was just so much of the revelation is so mysterious and so spiritual, and trying to understand it and using our human languages to explain it, to translate it is so difficult. But naturally, the Friends are relying on these spiritual confirmations as they pursue this very sacred work. So I know the Friends, this work of translation is now spread throughout the Pacific, including Australia and New Zealand, and throughout Samoa as well. So many of the Friends are involved in this very important work. And we're hoping to have this translated and published by the end of the formative age, the first century of the formative age, as our kind of target date to welcome in the next century with these two important documents.
Terrific. I wish you give my best wishes for the people working on that. Translation is very challenging and wonderful, but it's so rewarding also, in the sense that you penetrate the meaning of those texts in a very special way. I had the bounty of serving on the committee of the House of Justice that reviewed the translation of the Kitabi Akdas from Arabic into English with 5 other House members. 6 of us sat on that committee for 4 years, reviewing word by word, verse by verse. And after that, we sent out copies of it to 18 international readers and asked for their comments, non-Baha'is and Baha'is, professors and others, And we got so much helpful response from the Friends. And I hope that the Samoans, because you're not all there, you'll have some of the Samoans who are abroad and perhaps have gained a deep knowledge of English. You'll want to share the work, I think, with them and ask their views before things are finalized. Get the thing online once you have a translation. I would think that would be very helpful. That's what they were doing in Sweden and in the Norwegian countries. They put the whole thing online and leave it there for a year or so, and people then, now you have about a year, but you've got to collect all their comments. Your audience is not as large as the Swedish or Norwegian one, but you can get thoughts. Then the suggestions doesn't mean necessarily you're going to change anything, but you review it in committee again to see whether the comments that have come back to you about suggesting this word instead of that word and the reasons involved in it, then you make your decisions as a committee.
Vaisa has a question. Vaisa is one of our dear Samoan friends who's living in Australia now.
Not really living. Aloha, dear friends. Thank you very much, Mr. Dunbar. That was very inspiring. I was deeply touched by, when you said that when we teach, we have to use the names Baha'u'llah and Baha'i. I think that's a great, way of saying that we really teach when we say Baha'i and Baha'u'llah, because there's so much spirit in it. It really, it's very different from, trying to say what the glory of God is and all that other definitions and the manifestations of God. When we really say it, it has a lot of power and a lot of spirit into it. And I'm actually working in northern Queensland in Bowen City as a personal care worker, looking after the elderly and all that. And most of the residents here are from Germany, Italy, from England, from all over the world. And all I do is just care for them. But they also I think when you try to say something about Baha'u'llah, they catch it right away because it's very strange to them, and some of them say that they've never heard of the Baha'i faith and all that. So the closest thing that I point out to them is the Baha'i Temple in Sydney, and they all glow up, and all of a sudden they open up and they say, oh, we've been there and we've been there. And I think that's one greatness of the manifestation of Baha'u'llah. We're very blessed to be living in this day, in this age, no matter where we live and where we work. If we say Baha'u'llah and Baha'i, everything automatically falls into place. And I think with the pandemic right now, we are very comforted by the prayers every time. My family back in Samoa, they're very worried and very concerned, but I'm like, I'm okay. As long as we say our prayers, we teach, and we do, our mornings are better than our eves. That's all we need. And we need to work as hard as we can and do what's right and wash our hands and social distance. That's all matters. And do translation work. And I think this is wonderful. This is hearing from Mr. Dunbar today, and it's a bounty for me. I even texted my sister in New Zealand to get on and jump on and, just be with everyone, and being with everyone from all around the world who are Samoans. It's a great feeling ever, and it's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Friends, we have another friend from outside of Samoa, Nanai, who I think is in Australia or New Zealand. Nanai?
New Zealand.
Yeah, kia ora, tāna whalawa. I moved from Samoa here in 1998 and is living in Auckland, here in New Zealand. Had the bounty of serving on the assembly of the Auckland cluster here in New Zealand. And it's not a real question, but it might lead up to a question. But just wanting to share, firstly, I'd really like to congratulate the National Spiritual Assembly of Samoa, and also Councillor and everybody for putting together this forum. It started off with being invited to be part of the translation of the Kitab Aqdas. And I could share with you that some of the friends on this forum are also members of the New Zealand community. And having that opportunity to serve from afar in this very, what should I say, in this very important role as a translator, really brings us who live from abroad back home. Like what Councillor Johnson had expressed, in going through these translations, it really deepens you more, and it gives you a more sense of the reality of the world, where the world is right now. I want to acknowledge the sharing that Councillor shared with the story of prayers with Upa Dunbar. There's no better way and to empower us in how to try and present this very important portal of devotions. And I can tell you that it'll be a sharing that I will be sharing to some of our friends back here of how a personal experience that somebody had gone through can really bring home the portal that we are all trying with heart and soul to try and do. I realize that the forum is basically for the Samoan friends who live in the American Samoa and likewise in Samoa. But for us who live from afar, having this forum really empowers us as well. Now, as I said earlier on, this might lead on to a question. I didn't have a question in mind, but if it's out of line of the wishes or the purpose of the forum, then you don't have to answer it. But I just wanted to raise, while I have the opportunity, you know, having Hubert Dunbar on here is something that I feel the Pacific Island community here would really like to be part of too. And probably I'll have to go through the institutions to get that organized. But the question I wanted to raise, not that I deliberately wanted to raise, but the question that comes in mind is the language element for us who live afar. You know, for where we live, the indigenous, obviously, is the focal point for people, the next language that you try to communicate, first English, and then the indigenous language is Maori. But for us Samoans, language becomes a very, very big challenge for us here in trying to lift up that element of language, so that not only do we give a tool to communities of interest. You know, this is one of the challenges. You have elderly Samoans who are in New Zealand. They come into the faith and everything is done in English. And, you know, then they turn out and say, oh, this is not anything for the Samoans. It's for the English speaking people. So I don't know whether it's a question, but it's a sharing that I feel, if it can be taken on board, in what help we could get here. You know, with the current things we are doing, I think we are doing well. But there's no, I think there's no harm in getting further empowerment and further guidance from not only the friends in Samoa, but having Councillor Johnson also. And lastly, before I take all the time, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate our dear Bob Ale for, you know, I guess from all of us here in Samoa, we applaud you. Thank you very, very much. And we pray for your strength, your wisdom, and your courage in order to take up this role. We are all very proud of you, Famosili Ale, and prayers for everybody.
Mahalo, Nanai. We are all congratulating Bob and wanting to be there with him and hug him, and his family as well, who take on this step, this service, this journey together as a family. Mr. Dunbar, any thoughts on this sharing from our dear brother in?
No, I think that's very important that the National Assembly of Samoa itself consider how it can spread literature online or in publications with the Samoans that are living abroad, so that they'll be able to teach other Samoans that are there, obviously. It'd be important. Prayer books, hidden words, and presume that you have the Samoan courses. The Institute courses are available in Samoan as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Yeah, the Samoan community for so long has really dedicated themselves to translation, and the Institute courses, the gleanings, the prayers, the hidden words, and now to take on this these two weighty texts of Baha'u'llah is the next stage as well. I'm going to ask friends, we have, the Samoan Baha'is have always been participating in pioneering efforts throughout the Pacific. And you currently have a dear youth who's pioneering from Samoa into the Mariana Islands, actually in my village in Guam, Elena, who I've asked if she could offer a question or some thoughts. Elena?
Alapa friends, I'm sorry, my camera's off because there's a few actions behind me, so I do not want like my friends to be shown because they don't want to be shown. But in the introduction, Kirk has mentioned that you were involved when you were as a teenager, and I wanted to ask how service has been when you were a teenager, because I've been working with and also like in Samoa and some of the friends from American Samoa, and it has we have discovered like so many challenges in our own age group, and also like dealing with the communities and various people having various thoughts around this idea of youth. And I wanted to ask Mr. Hooper Dunbar, like was his experience when he was a teenager during his time of serving with various communities?
Well, you know, this was quite a while ago. This was in the 1950s. And the Baha'i activities for new people arriving in the scenes were to visit various firesides. We had 2 or 3 firesides a week, and new people were coming to them and asking questions. So you were hearing their questions and hearing the response of the Baha'i teachers. So we kind of got our preliminary education as Baha'is was hearsay in the meetings, you know. Then we began studying the writings. That was a different stage of development. But the teenagers didn't have anything quite of their own to do. They did organize at one point, after I'd been a Baha'i about a year, we had created panels of youth who would go to different communities, and each one would speak for 15 minutes. So you'd have an hour-long presentation on some aspect of the Baha'i teachings. And I remember I was invited to go to the one in Las Vegas, and went there and was in a Baha'i meeting in Las Vegas. That was my first speaking of the faith in a meeting. And it was during that time pilgrims were coming back from the Guardian's table, and they were telling such stories of the Guardian's concerns and how he was not pleased with the American Baha'i community, that they weren't arising sufficiently to match the needs of the World Crusade. And he sent a message back through Mrs. Mayberry, who was also on that first teaching center with me, to tell the Baha'is there that he wanted a veritable exodus of Baha'is from Los Angeles to other countries, Latin America and Europe. At that time where the gold countries were. And I heard the people all say this: well, I can't really go because my mother's old, or I can't go because my children are in school, or I can't go because I have this job or that job. And I could, of course, not go because I was filming TV shows and movies and making them, and that didn't happen anyplace else. But I said I didn't have any, sick mothers or outstanding debts or anything, so I offered to go. And the committees, the International Pioneer Committees, came up with 3 places that I could pioneer to. One were the Caroline Islands, another was Nicaragua, and the third was Alaska, way in the interior of Alaska, freezing place. I don't know how I would have fared there. And there was no work for me in the Caroline Islands. They wanted, the National Assembly wanted to have some job, but I did get a job teaching English in Nicaragua, and that gave me the motive, when I was 20 to get out. I became 21 after I became 21, and then I went out pioneering, because they told me that, you're too young to go out, and what will you do? You can't be on assemblies yet. And so there was a bit of a stall. And then the Guardian passed, and I'd already promised to go pioneering, so I said, I'm going to go. And I went off to Nicaragua. And I taught English there. I didn't speak much Spanish at the time, but I taught English. So then it was just a question of, surviving. I remember how much I thought we should love the country where we're going and love the people. Abdullah says, if you look at the people, you'll find shortcomings. It's hard to love them. You have to love them as the human race, as expressions of God, creatures of God, and see their potential, address their potential, because you can't always see the good things you're supposed to see. And there was a difficult population in the capital, and a lot of drinking and a lot of carousing around, and I got deathly sick right away, miserably sick, crawling back and forth from a metal cot to the bathroom and back again, and feverish and so on. At one point, I felt my love fading for Nicaragua. And I was so desperate with that. And I said to Baha'u'llah, I don't like it here very much. And the answer came so clearly, who said you had to like it? And that was such a relief to me. I thought, I don't have to like it. I can do the work. I can stay here. I can try to get better. And about that time, I fell ill for 6 weeks with hepatitis. This is the trials, the early trials of serving the cause.
Friends, we are coming upon the 2-hour mark, and I think it's probably close to drawing this conversation to a close. If there's any pressing question or thought or comment, Steve, up the mountain. Steve, go ahead. You can take yourself off mute. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you also, and congratulations to Bob from our part of the country. Mr. Dunbar, thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. We have a couple of questions coming from our group here. One is to do with COVID-19, which was mentioned by Supervisor in Australia. The question is, if you look at the message of the 10th of May from the Universal House of Justice, they hint at the fact that it may be with us for quite a period of time, and we should be prepared for this. The question we have here, we just received 283 odd passengers from the United States of America, but at this point in time, Samoa is COVID-19 free. We have no known cases of infection. Should we be worried in Samoa? And what are your thoughts on the pandemic and how it's affecting how the Baha'is are now operating around the world? Thank you. That's the first question.
Well, I think the Baha'is should be guided by the authorities and the health experts, the scientists that are dealing with the question. In general, it seems that the question has become rather politically oriented. The question of how many new cases, and we're testing for a lot more than in the past. So the number of people that do have it is on the rise all the time, but they don't all manifest all the symptoms or become ill. And the figures for those that are dying from COVID-19 around the world have dropped radically. They're much less than they were back in April and May and so on. That's not a reason to not be careful and follow all the precautions, but let's hope we can survive for another day to go on with our teaching and be able to get out of our houses to do it.
Steve, you had another question? Yeah?
Yes. Can I ask where you are in the world, Hoopa?
in California, and in the out in the countryside outside of Sacramento, but surrounded by a lot of books.
Okay, so, the question I have is, good, that's great. The greatness of America is written throughout many writings that refer to the future, by Shoghi Effendi, for example. But looking at what's happening now in America and the current political climate and the unfolding crises to do with race relations, what's your take on what's happening and the immediate future and perhaps the long-term future? Because there are references also to Americans wanting to flee their country as refugees.
Well, you know, I would like to have prophetic characteristics to answer questions like that, but I don't have. I think what we could say is that the greatness of the American Baha'i community has been described. The reasons why it was chosen have been described in the advent of divine justice, that the Americans were the most materialistic nation. Materialism, the Guardian used to say, was born in Europe, raised in America, and exported to the rest of the world. And because of their attachment to material things and material lives, you know, the Guardian pointed out how they had been chosen so that the revelation could transform them. And they became the cradle of the administrative order. This is a very important development in the cause. He said the cause, the heart of the cause, Shoghi Effendi said at that time, moved from Iran right across to the United States. That was where the heart and pulse beat of the cause was taking place. And the Americans then pioneered developing, under Shoghi Effendi's tutelage, obviously, but developing the incorporation papers for local spiritual assemblies and for national assemblies. And the Guardian said that this was such a model that it should be adopted by all the countries as they come into the faith in the future. Then they have this distinction of being called upon to propagate the divine plan, which they did to a great extent. So there is some very good history. The Shoghi Effendi was stating that it wasn't for sure that they could keep this position of primacy. And he used to, this is now getting into the area of pilgrim notes, but the Guardian used to say that America had not yet had war on its own soil, and that it would require that, it may require that kind of a step before they would be able to arise to the, properly to the mission of leading the world spiritually. So the question is still up for grabs. I suppose the House of Justice will help define it in the future. In the meantime, I was trying to travel as much. The Master says in the Divine Plan, the teacher should travel internationally, should travel all the time. And I've tried to do that over the years. And now that I can't travel, I'm glad I can visit with you all via the Zoom program. That's terrific. Friends, I think as Kirk said, we've had a couple hours here. I'm happy to come back and see you again in the future. Thank you all for inviting me and to Kirk for organizing this, and wish all the best to your new counselor there. And so nice to see you. I think I'll take my leave. Lots of blessings. Lots of blessings. Bye-bye.
On behalf of we want to thank Mr. Dunbar. Francis, it might be nice.
Bye, Bye,
Friends, maybe we could ask one person to say a prayer to draw this to a close. If I could ask here Matalena, from who's in New Zealand, maybe with her children, maybe you can say a prayer for us, Matalena. That's the response we need. She left. Matalena, come back.
She's getting her kid.
Getting the kid.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Come here, come with me.
Come here.
Come here. Come. Sit right together. Good boy. Come.
Matalena, maybe you can chant PAIA, you can sing PAIA with the kids, and we can all sing as well. We'll be on mute, but we'll be singing as well. Thank you, Matalena. That's the result of 2 hours of sitting down. That's the response we get from the kids. Good job, Matalena. Good job with the kids. Friends, thank you all, and special thanks and gratitude to our beloved National Spiritual Assembly. It's so wonderful to be able to connect across the ocean like this, from the Leilata friends to up in the mountain to, to dear Ruta. Ruta, where are you? Are you at home in New Zealand or are you on the mountain?
Yeah, the mountain.
I'm in New Zealand. I'm in New Zealand.
And some of you have also met Mr. Dunbar, served with him while he was serving at the World Center. So it's such a wonderful opportunity, and to see the friends up at the Art Center, enjoying that beautiful weather outside, and it's just such a bounty to be together. And I think also it's so wonderful to hear you all share your love and thoughts about dear Bob. That also, I think, has filled our hearts. This news has all filled our hearts so much. There you are. There's the friends at the Art Center. There's the Mogbelpours, and there you go. Everybody's there. That's wonderful. It's so good to see you all.
Mucho gusto de verlo, señor Dunbar, después de tantos años.
Oh my goodness. Wonderful.
Where's Wendy? And Wendy's here too, and Steve.
Oh, my ugly face.
Hi, Vaisa.
Yeah.
Hello, Vaisa.
Bye.
Ja, en meer les passen voor.
Hello, Pasho.
Hello, Pa. Hey, Rachel.
Hello. Leuta, Malovali, Maukia.
Hello, Siaki. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Siaki, Maweli.
Hello, Funa.
Hello, Lava, Hamai.
Hallo, passen voor.
Hello, Lava. Sorry.
Cô Phạm nhé.
Sa po nga ngay.
Sige po. Sige po.
Halo, Makalima.
Halo, saya Pua.
Halo, Nanay. Nanay.
Halo po, Mama Koso.
Halo, Winter Kuya James.
Halo, James. Sheila.
Dạ, ủa bà cô.
Ya,
Opa.
Bye bye. Ủa bà.
Aku tua.
Pero
Coming up.